Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Proactive Management for the Contractor. This webinar is brought to you by Applied Software. My name is Caitlin Dunn and I'm pleased to be your moderator today. We encourage you to take advantage of our fully customizable webinar console by clicking the icons at the bottom of your screen. You can resize any of these widgets during the presentation. Click the Help widget if you need assistance, then you have the Slides widget that contains the PowerPoint used for today's presentation. The media player allows you to control the volume. After that, you have the Q&A widget where you can type in questions and comments throughout the presentation. We'll take time to answer questions during the webinar. We are excited to connect with you further. Please take a moment to introduce yourself. For other questions or comments or to request more information, click on the next widget to send us an email. Next is the Facebook widget. Like our page to catch up on the latest trends, training opportunities, and much more. You can take the survey at any time during or after the webinar. The resource widget contains links to check out our free webinar library and register for upcoming webinars. This webinar is being recorded for your convenience. You'll be receiving an email with the recording link for future reference. Find Applied Software on social media to make meaningful connections, receive special offers, and stay up to date on the newest innovations. Be sure to visit our website, ASTI.com, to see how to achieve your design and business objectives through our innovative solutions, training options, and services. Click the link in the resource widget to register for our next webinars and to review previously recorded webinars on demand. All right, now we have a few poll questions for everyone to answer. I'll give everyone a minute to get their answers in for this first one and move to see the answers. All right, if anyone has difficulty seeing their screen or anything, our first question is, does your company currently review defect issues? Your options are yes, not at this time, and no, but we really should.
People are quiet today.
Yeah.
It's
Looks like we have half of our attendees have answered. We're still waiting on a few people, but it might be a little bit of a problem, so we'll see. Let's see what a lot of people said. Okay, so it's like an overwhelming not at this time. Okay.
Wow.
We can go ahead and skip the next two because it seems like the audience might be having a little bit of trouble. We could probably come back to them at the end of the webinar. So yeah, I'll go ahead and push Mark Petrucci's bio. All right, so awesome. I am pleased to introduce Rob Mckinney and Mark Petrucci. Rob is the Director of Business Development at AEC Construction Software, and Mark is the Director of Technical Services at Applied Software. We're so pleased to have them announced today. So thank you for joining us today, guys. Take it away.
All right, I appreciate it. Let me see if I can grab control here real quick.
All right, I'll let you know when I can see your screen.
Good deal.
All right, you're good.
Even better. So is it totally taking over the full screen now?
Looks like it.
Good deal. You never know with the technology these days, especially the bandwidth of internet in rural North Georgia. All right.
So
let's get this
true.
party going. All right. So again, this is Rob Mckinney. Great to talk to everybody today. Thank you so much for sticking with us for 3 parts of this journey of talking about productivity. And we're going to get right to it. So, Mark, thank you again for your time today. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, Rob. How are you doing?
It's good, man. I'm trying to just remember, what day am I on? Am I healthy? Is everybody good? I'm not sure how much rain you've recently experienced, but up here in North Georgia, I think we got about 8 inches last week. Now, granted, I'm not complaining. It could be a lot worse in other parts of the country, without a doubt. But it's been a wet few weeks. It's the sun's out today, and that's awesome. So,
yeah, but weather temperatures have been great, though. So I enjoy when it gets cooler.
Yes, that is for sure. I was talking to people out in Southern California that are still in the 90s, which is very unusual for them. Our weather today, cannot complain being down here in Georgia, without a doubt. So one thing I'd like to start off with, we'll just do a short review in case you have not joined us for session 1 or session 2. We're just going to do a quick little overview to remind you. So we had 9 tips total we were talking about in regards to improving productivity. So the first one, as a former safety professional, safety is something should be first in a lot of minds. And unfortunately, sometimes it gets pushed to the side. But we talked a lot about safety and how safety really helps productivity. We talked a lot about those lagging indicators versus leading indicators. And Mark, you brought some things to the table, specifically with technology in the Ben360 platform. So if you guys want to go back and look at that first session, there's a lot of things in there about what the technology can help you do to improve your safety. And then the second part we got into was just talking about pre-planning and the need for creating your own logistics plan, maybe holding a preparatory plan. The idea was, what can you do before you actually start that job, but even during it in your different sequences of how can you do a little bit better at pre-planning. And then third is I introduced that concept of the Moneyball approach of how to look at your teams and formulate your construction crews similar to what you see in pro sports. And we asked some kind of hard questions of, are you really looking at how much your crews cost you per hour, per day, per week? Really is figuring out, can you afford the crew that you put on a job? Now, number 2, the session number 2, we switched gears a little bit. So we talked about personnel management, and specifically, what is it like for your crews? And we talked about the cultural differences in our industry of how we have crews that go from company to company, project to project. How do you kind of zone them in and keep them on the same page? Then we talked about material handling. Yes, sir.
Rob, sorry to interrupt you, but we're looking at your presenter view, and we're not looking at, if you swap those around, it'll make it bigger for everybody.
Let's
try swap,
Now do we
much
have it?
better. Yep.
Oh, that
yep.
looks perfect. Great.
Yep, much better.
When you're looking at 3 screens, sometimes your eye gets off the ball, literally.
All right, looks good now.
Right on. So talk about that material handling. And Mark, this is something to throw over to your court a little bit. We brought up fabricating assemblies off-site. We talked a little bit about prefab. We really talked about optimizing the job site and ordering. What are you seeing right now with people out in the construction space? Are you hearing more interest, especially, let's say, after MEP Force? Are you hearing more interest about fabrication off-site or anything to optimize the job sites, or are contractors still kind of status quo? Anything you're seeing out there, Mark?
There we go. Fabrication offsite has been the buzzword in the industry. Everybody understands, especially now with the capabilities we have with a BIM file, that as much as we can fabricate offsite, the benefits that we receive not only just improve being able to construct faster and better, but we really eliminate a lot of the dangers associated with construction on site. So the fabrication of assemblies off-site have multiple benefits, and that seems to be the biggest buzzword in the industry right now.
Well, hopefully in the next 12 to 24 months, I hope we see a shift from it being a buzzword to a status quo, right, of people taking it and adopting it.
Yeah.
I think we talked a little bit about analyzing your rework cost. And this is what we're going to move into today. So we're going to start with those tips and thinking about how to do some things a little bit differently. And Mark, I want to throw it over to you. There are some things inside of Ben360 specifically that you were talking to me about off air, about how you're going to connect, organize, and let's really leverage how to optimize those project sites. So can you kind of walk us through when we're talking about the cost impacts?
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty common that, there's going to be rework on a project. And, if you're going to do something twice, obviously there's going to be time associated with the rework. And any sort of rework would involve undoing work that you've done previously. And if it's a matter of, undoing maybe some concrete that you've poured, that could be a really big deal. So it's important that we take a look at the cost and the effect of rework and how it affects the schedule. In construction, it can be a very disorganized process. There's a lot of planning involved. There's a lot of people involved. There's, people from different disciplines, different contractors and subcontractors during the construction phase. Even on a different number of phases, there could be multiple decisions that have to be made. And with all this disorganization, there's bound to be a huge amount of rework. Mm-hmm. The amount of time that we waste doing the rework, it's said that it costs the industry $280 billion a year. And to build on that, 35% of that time is wasted performing non-optimal activities. I mean, work that we should be putting towards moving forward, we're actually stepping back to fix problems that were created during construction. So the effects of time wasted due to rework and inefficiency is massive. Move on to the next
one. Those are huge numbers. Huge numbers. Anything with a B in our industry really should get your attention. But, that is a hard number to wrap your head around at a contractor level. But 35%, I think anyone listening that works at a contractor can wrap your mind easily around 14 hours of waste per week, because to your point, you get paid to put it in once, not twice, not three times. Every time you're messing with a scope of work, afterwards it's just eroding your profit or making it more unsafe. These are fascinating numbers, Mark.
Yeah, if you factor in, the salary, what we pay, the weekly hours for people who have to do this type of work, it's actually costing the industry $2.4 million per firm wasted each year. It is just amazing how much money is wasted due to the rework.
Not a good thing. Not a good thing.
Yeah.
Now, you're also talking about the complexity of technologies. Can you break this one down for us?
Yeah. Projects are becoming increasingly complex. I mean, it is amazing to look at projects, to just wonder how they can construct the buildings the way they do. But, because of the technology, we're able to do that. There's still no doubt that we're in a world where there's an app for that, and we can use this app and that app. But, one, are they actually using the apps? And two, do the apps actually work together? I mean, that's a big deal, because that is very typical. We see where people will download an app to do one specific task, and unfortunately that information then just does not progress through, the rest of the project. What you're looking at here with these numbers, JB Knowledge, they found that 25% of construction companies use 5 or more different platforms for their work, and only 6% of companies use software that actually talks to each other. So, PlanGrid and FMI, they found that 75% of GCs and subcontractors, they provide mobile devices to project managers and field supervisors, but only 18% of them actually use the apps on a mobile device to access their project data and to collaborate. A lot of times we think that because of all these devices, it requires less collaboration, when in reality, it requires more collaboration. It makes it more efficient, but if we know how to use the apps and the software that's available, we could actually reduce the amount of waste that's currently associated with what we're doing today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And how about the numbers you've got here when we're talking about those business results?
Yeah, so this slide, this slide was put together based on information provided by a lot of big companies like Turner, working on a $26 million, 8,300 square foot utility plant. IMCO Construction, Barton Mallow, Skanska, Hill Partnership, a number of companies providing information on projects where they've started using products to make the whole process of construction more efficient. 65% reduced project schedule, 50% reduced time and coordination. Something near and dear to me because of my construction background and civil background, the 23% faster layout preparation and 50% layout cost, reduction in layout cost. I remember in the early days when I was doing layout the manual way, and it just took so much time, and there were multiple people involved doing layout, and things are just so much more efficient today. And then finally, 88% more productivity per work week and 20% productivity gain. I mean, it is amazing just taking advantage of today's technology, just how much more efficient we can be, or companies can be out in the field, but also produce better quality work as well.
It would be amazing to see somebody do a time study on snap lines, chalk, batter boards, measuring tapes, and crews on their hands and knees versus, let's say, a digital scanner layout tool, total station. That would be interesting to see. I bet you find that 50% real quick, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was IMCO Construction on a project where they had more than 100,000 man-hours of work. They completed the project with just one layout error, And
Wow.
That project had an 18-month schedule, and it was delivered in 8 months. And so the technology is out there, and what people need is to learn about that technology and then need help on implementing it. And once you do that, the return on the investment, I think, is pretty quick.
Oh, absolutely. Speaking of numbers, let's talk about a couple numbers here.
Yeah, so, this is from the Boston Consulting Group, and they talk about implementing a cloud technology solution. The whole idea is that by taking advantage of the cloud, the data is not sitting back at somebody's office or sitting in the trailer. It is literally at your fingertips. These numbers speak for themselves, and the argument for technology innovation in design and in construction, it's clear. No project should be started without a technology strategy. There are solutions out there, and one of them that near and dear to my heart is BIM 360. So I got one slide to show you some of the things that we can do with BIM 360. It is not made for one particular contractor. BIM 360 can be used from design all the way through construction, even over to handover. But, we can impact the project life cycle cost by 15% and can cut the construction time by 30%, which is amazing. Because the more work we can get done faster just means we can move on to the next project.
Absolutely.
So this slide here, which shows, all the different features of BIM 360, document management, that's where everything starts, where our documents are placed in the cloud. The beauty here with BIM 360, which separates it from other systems out there, is that BIM 360 is tightly integrated with BIM and Revit models. So, we often have companies that are using Revit, and if you simply take your Revit model, move it up to BIM 360 Cloud, there is no special tools you need to be able to view that model or mark it up or create issues or generate RFIs. It's all right there at your fingertips. I will tell you, BIM 360 has really exploded just in recent months because of the whole design collaboration. With COVID and everybody working from home, companies were struggling with VPN and peer-to-peer networks, Dropbox. Copying files back and forth is completely inefficient and just causes problems. But with BIM 360, the fact that your Revit and your AutoCAD models can live in the cloud and anybody given permission can access it and do work, it has made a huge difference for those companies who have adopted the design collaboration part of it. And you can see the rest of what you're looking at here, all these features that are available in BIM 360. For some contractors, they may only need a few of these. For GC, they may need a bigger choice here. But the beauty here is that, you can pick and choose what you would like to use, and everything is licensed by user. We don't care about the size of the project. We don't care how many projects. Once you're issued a license, you have unlimited number of projects and unlimited. You have access to unlimited number of projects per user. So, and then the licenses can be moved from person to person if the roles change.
Good deal. Let's talk a little bit about that power of connecting the data. Can you explain a little bit more about what the BIM 360 Sync actually offers users?
Yeah, this is a huge tool. This is a tool actually we developed specifically to integrate BIM 360 with, in the early days, Windows. And since then, it has expanded. Because we know companies are still going to use, some different software that they have already implemented. A Bluebeam customer would say, I love Bluebeam. And as much as I've had some customers switch from Bluebeam to BIM 360 Docs, if they still want to use Bluebeam, our 360 Sync tool says, hey, I'll copy a file over to Bluebeam, and it will also copy it over to BIM 360, or vice versa. And if I'm the project manager, or if I'm the BIM or VDC manager, and I've got people uploading to BIM 360, I want that to automatically get copied over to one of the other tools that are used out there. So we've done a lot with integrating with these products, but some of these products now, our 360 Sync tool isn't really necessary because they automatically integrate with BIM 360. Like eSub, for example, it automatically integrates with BIM 360. There is an app in BIM 360 that we just load into the project, and now eSub has direct input or access to BIM 360. And
Absolutely.
Rob, I think you may know a little bit about that.
Absolutely. That's something we need to do a follow-up webinar, is really the power of utilizing eSub for, I'm speaking specifically to anybody that's listening that is at a trade contractor. You're looking for that place to manage your documents. And I'm talking about document control for things such as RFI, a change order. If you're looking where to do your business, but utilize the power of BIM 360 where you are storing those model files, your 2D files, where all the project documents, the plans are stored. That's where that great integration comes into play, where we can work better together. So, Mark, that's something we need to think about, is maybe showing people in the next month or two how those two really kind of work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that all goes back to, the integration, the tight integration, seamless integration just makes the data between, eSub and BIM 360 virtually seamless.
That's it. Well, that was a quick update on where we've been so far. So we had 2 sessions prior to this, and we're going to finish off things today with these 3 areas. We're going to talk about conducting defect analysis, which sounds like from the poll, we can shed a little light there, and I get it. That's a purple elephant. No one likes to talk about defects, but you have to. You don't talk about what kind of went wrong, how you fix it going forward. Then equipment management. That's an interesting thing to talk about these days, where talking to lots of contractors around the country, how many pieces of equipment, Mark, would you even begin to wager from, let's say, mid-March to June, sat idle on a project site, or were locked down and couldn't even get to them, and were, underutilized is a gross exaggeration, right? But now things are opening up. Where is your equipment? Where is it the most advantageous to look at it? Also, just think about how you purchase. And then the last part we'll talk about is a concept called SWOT. And we'll dive into that, because some companies, again, self-study is an interesting thing to think about, and specifically here to honestly look at your own strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities going forward, but also threats, this is kind of a crucial time to really kind of think through that. So let's start off with tip number 7, conducting defect analysis. So recommendations I like to just throw out there. First is you have to be open and willing to look at something that went wrong. Depending on what you build, you may do one-off construction. You may be into something that's a product that may be more repetitive. What if you build fast food chains? What if you do data centers? If you're working for one particular client, it may be easy to drill down into a defect and figure out how to improve that, but it's a different thing to think about. So first, you need to select a defect to study as a team. I'll give you a painful example from my past. It was sliding glass doors on a 4-story wood structure apartment that didn't go good. When I say didn't go good, it means they leaked pretty much from the day we put them in, anytime it rained on the north side of the building. So we had to put our team together to analyze the defects, because if you've been in the business long enough, Mark, you probably heard these stories, right? If something goes wrong on a project during construction, who normally gets blamed first between the architect, the engineer, or the contractor?
It's the contractor.
It's almost like a bad joke, but it's the truth, right?
Yep.
So,
and listen, and the architect will say, I designed it a certain way and I drew it a certain way, but it wasn't installed the correct way. Heard that.
Oh, yeah. Or, we love our architects. Amazing skills, the vision to put things together. But how often have you ever heard this term of, that was not the intent of my design?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So you got to select the defect. In my case, it was a leaky sliding glass door assembly on a patio. We put our team together. We had to measure and quantify. Now, this is where it gets a little sticky, right? So we're measure and quantify. It was not just us as the general contractor who, by the way, was installing said sliding glass doors. We had to think about every other trade associated inside the room. So if this is a living room that we're installing these, so we had to literally hold the sheetrock back because we did not want it to get, we didn't want it to get wet out. We had to hold the flooring back. And some of the utilities, and depending on room and where we're talking about, we obviously want to run electrical outlets close to where we had water issues. So there was a big quantification here. So if we're talking 88 units times 4 to 5 trades, it got expensive quick. And we had to go through our variations and our causes. So what we, ended up doing, we had our team. We all worked together. So us, the general contractor, with the trade contractors, with the engineers, with the architects, and then we had to bring in the manufacturer. And so to really add some color to this, Mark, imagine this. We're building this 4-story product, this building in Atlanta, Georgia. These door assemblies were manufactured and put together in Colorado, put on flatbeds and shipped to us. Now, Mark, would you think that anything driven that distance would have any kind of vibration or shaking or bouncing? The door would just show up perfectly ready to be installed, right? No issues.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be nice. That would be nice, but we know what could happen while it's on the road with all that vibration.
Oh,
not to mention also just the schedule. What if there's an accident? What if there are delays?
That's right.
All of that has an impact. Yep.
That's it. So we had to start brainstorming. We had to crowdsource. We're talking to all the carpenters installing this. We're back in the early days of FaceTime, we're having FaceTime conversations with the manufacturer and the engineers of standing there on the balcony, literally pouring water to the window, trying to understand it. And we eventually figured it out, and it revolved around the way that the weep holes at the base of the track were designed. And basically, there weren't enough of them. It just overflowed. And if you know anything about, sliding glass doors, water's going to find the path of least resistance, and that path was coming under the door and going through the track. But we had to do so much brainstorming. We were doing so much testing, asking for ideas, and then we had a fix. And so that's when we implemented our process. But, the owner was already upset about what was going on, so we had to continually measure it. We were working every time that every single door we put in, we were trying to make that door a little bit better every time, trying to, work on this and improve things to kind of save face. So one thing I want you to think about in that example that I'm giving you is think about non-productive time versus productive time, because the case I'm giving you was extreme. Our productive time basically went to zero. Our non-productive time was off the charts. But traditionally, some of the numbers that I've seen out there before revolve around these items: waiting for instructions, waiting on resources, waiting for your assignment. There's a lot of waiting, unfortunately, in construction when we're talking about non-productive time, and that leads to inaccurate information sometimes coming in on your productivity. But even the double handling, Mark, you talked a little bit before about accidents, that non-productive time, that's something you really have to dive into in this defect analysis, because if we really look at the other side, the productive time, if everything's going in the way it was designed, per the schedule, per the specs, you're at full production. But the reality is, unfortunately, we don't always see this balance. I'd be curious, Mark, what have you seen from recent interactions with your clients on this non-productive versus productive time? Are you hearing that it's balanced, or is it uneven?
Well, it's interesting. They're so used to the non-productive time, they just think it's part of the project. And, we have to remind them that just because it happens all the time doesn't mean it should be expected or part of the project. There's got to be a way to fix that and reduce the non-productive time. Absolutely.
I hear you, man. I hear you. So quick high-level things just to kind of think about. Take that one defect to study. Make it a theme for the project. In our case, it was not our theme. It was our mantra. The whole project knew we had that issue. We had to work on it. But use it as an example and try and just move things forward a little bit. So another thing to throw out, and we're talking about the defects, and let's just say in 2020, one thing you can think about is tools. And one thing I think every contractor could benefit from is figuring out where your tools are stored on the job and how you're organized. Because looking for tools, in my memory, was a huge issue. It was a huge waste of time for crews that just did not have things laid out properly. If you only have one Connex box on the job or maybe one gang box, and you keep it on the first floor or the second floor, but it's a 10-story job, how much walk time is going on looking for things? So let's just think through one area. If we're saying that 6% of your day could be for looking for tools, focus in. Where can you map out the job better? Can you get extra gang boxes or smaller boxes? How do you leverage, with this COVID thing going on, how to be more proactive with the tools than reactive and trying to find some things? So just want to leave that little nugget there for you to think about. Now, tip number 8, equipment management. We have all kinds of equipment on our job sites. We have small tools. We have small equipment. We have large equipment. And the thing to think about this is there's a big difference fundamentally if you really think through labor and equipment. So the first thing I want to bring up, in a productive state or not at work, and that's both ways, right? If you're talking about an employee, that's the labor, and we just talked about non-productive versus productive state. But sometimes we don't really think about that equipment because, well, I need it on site. You may not be using that generator 8 hours a day, but if temporary power goes down, I have to have it. Or how many different scissors lifts do you have? How many excavators? You got to really think through the productive state of that. But the goal, if you're really thinking about this equipment, is they're tools for turning materials into our goods and services. But how much do you need on the job site? And more specifically, let's really dive in. How are you capturing your cost? And is there hourly rate to charge for? And really I'm getting at is how much markup do we have? So to really dive into it, let's think about it like this. Equipment doesn't have an attitude. And that's a good thing, right? Humans, we have attitudes. We have very positive attitudes. Unfortunately, some of us have negative attitudes. But the last thing I want to really press on is equipment does have types of cost. You either have a fixed or you have a variable. And that depends on how your company wants to set it up. If you've bought an asset, if you're renting an asset. Is it by the job, by the hour? Mark, what are you seeing from people right now, specifically when they're talking about their equipment? Is equipment cost in our current year a big issue for people that you're talking with?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there are those that, depending who you ask, right? For some people, to them, it's not a big deal because it's, the equipment's there or it's not. But for the project managers who have to monitor the expense, yeah, to them it's a huge deal.
Huge deal to understand. So that's when we go back to our technology, right? Why are you taking really solid daily reports in a digital sense? Or photos of equipment when it is delivered to the site, when you're taking it off rent. Big time communication for how you may have your job set up and sharing that information. You know, when you really look at it, we start talking about owning equipment. And that's a big decision for companies to make, right? Is do you need to own this equipment outright? You know, the contractor I work for example, had 2 cranes. We had an American crawler crane from the 1950s, kind of Franken crane. Just scared me to death. But we had an operator that knew it in and out, and we had a mechanic that could work on it. Then we had a newer Grove RT. So we owned 2 different types of cranes, but we also rented cranes depending on a job or the scale, or we couldn't use something. We had different types of, you know, we had heavy equipment, but we did not have interior equipment that you would think of like a scissors lift. But a lot of trade contractors, this is something to struggle with. If you think about, do you have the fixed cost and the variable side of this? And this work through this the rest of the year thinking, this year, you may have more equipment than you needed because of the situation with COVID, and you may be thinking about liquidating some of that, and it could be a good idea. But if you're going to come out of the back end in 2021, maybe you are going to need that. Something interesting to think about, but really breaking down those costs for your contract and really kind of thinking through it and kind of moving through there. Now, the last section we want to talk about is an interesting concept. It's called SWOT, and I was introduced to this several years back. And some of it at first made sense, and some of it did not make sense. And I'll be very candid. This can be a transformative process for your company. It can be painful, though. And let's just talk about it. So what are we looking at? You're looking at yourself, and it's an easy chart to create. You want to talk about your strengths versus your weaknesses. What are you really good at, and what are you not so good at? And then where are the opportunities? Right now, I've talked to a lot of contractors the last 4 to 5 weeks, and they see opportunity everywhere in 2021. But there's also threats. So you have to weigh these things out and really kind of think through it. Again, what are you the best at? What are your strengths? Are they still your strengths currently? Can you make any improvements on those weaknesses, right? Now, Mark, I'm curious, what do you hear from anybody about this new opportunity? Because if you've worked through construction a while, do you have clients that are thinking, you know, we don't normally do X type of work, but we think we can move into that? And maybe it's like, let's say it's an electrical contractor that thinks they can get into service. Or it could be a general contractor that thinks, you know, we might be able to make a little money. We're going to self-perform drywall. Are you hearing this trend pop up with anyone you're talking with?
Oh, yeah. I was on a call just today with a company that was talking about that they're thinking of, you know, self-performing. And so, you know, we're all looking for ways to expand our services.
It's something you always got to look at. But I would encourage people to go through this process, right? If you're not doing it, can you do it? Because the backside of this would be that threat, right? If it's not in your wheelhouse, does your team have the ability to do that, or are you looking to hire new employees, purchase another company, create a partnership, a merger, different things? I mean, I can tell you in my former life, we tried a few things that were not in our sweet spot. And a couple of times we tried it, it was not pretty. It did not go good because the learning curve, it's, well, let's just say it can be expensive, right? So how do you implement this? A couple of things to throw out there. First, I read this a long time ago, and Mark, I'll be curious your thoughts on it, because I still believe it's true today. No day of the week should be more productive than another. Why do people, Mark, always say, oh, it's Monday? You know, why is Monday versus Wednesday versus Friday? Why, in theory, why should there be a difference in your production rates over 5 days?
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great point, and I know the social aspect of, you know, Monday, but honestly, there's a project and there's a schedule, and the schedule doesn't care if it's Monday or Wednesday or Friday. There's a schedule. You have so many days, and you got to get the work done.
Absolutely, because things change. We are seeing huge issues happen across the country. Just the weather alone, right? Down where we are in the southeast, we've had significant weather events with rain. You know, up in the mountains, it's an annoyance, but it can be a delay. Down, you know, further south, closer to Louisiana, it's a horrific disruption of your personal life and your work life. Or I was talking with some people last week out in the Western region. When you talk to a contractor and says, yeah, COVID affected us and it slowed us down, but what's got us completely shut down is fires, because the smoke is so thick. Our crews literally can't breathe on a job site. Those changes, when they originally bid that job and wrote that schedule, that was probably not factored in, right? But how do you adjust to it? So some of the stuff we talked about in the first and the second session, just to leave a couple final thoughts with you, is really think about construction as a game. Do you really understand the contract? Which are your rules? And can you really flex to that? And leaving one last thing with you, we talked about that Moneyball approach, and you can look at it in software. You can look at it in your productivity. You can look at it in how you want to formulate your crews. But one thing to try and leave a message of positivity, we've seen so many things affect us here in 2020, and we're coming close to some very significant changes with an election. What are you looking at to come out of everything that's happened to us this year? And not just thrive, right? I want to see people, survive. We want you to come out and we want you to thrive. I get so excited thinking about the possibilities going forward. I can't even talk straight sometimes, Mark. It's think about what we've given you in these 9 tips. What can you do to kind of look at the company? How can you help it grow? And if you always have questions or concerns, you can find us anytime, ask us any kind of questions, and kind of lead things from that point. So we're getting close. I want to thank everybody again for staying with us for the 3 sessions. I hope that these tips have helped you, benefited you. If there's anything we could ever do, please let us know. And I think with that, if we have a little bit of time, we can open up a little bit of Q&A. Does anybody have any questions that we might be able to answer for you now live?
Checking the Q&A right now. Well, it looks like there's no questions so far, which generally means you answered everybody's questions. So great job.
And we try hard. I really appreciate it for ASTI giving me this opportunity to work with you and distribute some content. Mark, thank you for helping me out for 2 of these sessions and sticking by me. Anything you have to say before we sign off, Mark?
I'll tell you what, if you guys have questions, definitely reach out to Rob or myself. Rob and I work closely together. In fact, just today we talked about a meeting we're going to have next week on some other topics. But definitely take what we've presented today, and if you have any questions, feel free to follow up with either one of us.
Well, awesome. Thank you both so much. You did an awesome job. And everybody out there, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you spending your time with us and trust it was meaningful and impactful for you and your business. We look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Thank you.